It was a bona fide blowout in Ames on Saturday, with once again the Baylor Bears being at the wrong end of that. So what went wrong against Iowa State? Let's break it down on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans. Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day, and brought to you today by FanDuel. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Appreciate you making it your first listen today and every day with all your Baylor content. Nowhere else to go but right here, Locked On Baylor. We are going to talk about kind of the reaction to the game on Saturday against Iowa State. Once again, another lopsided loss for the Bears. And also kind of diving into what Dave Aranda said about this game, where it all went wrong. And I actually think a very interesting quote from Aranda last night that should be raising the antennas of all Baylor football fans, whether you're defending him or not. All that is coming up on this episode of Locked On Baylor. Obviously, you don't need to look much further than the defense in this one. You gave up 43 points. Iowa State, good team. Don't get me wrong, good team. And you could make an argument for the best in the Big 12 right now. You could. I think they're somewhere in that top. I think they're in the top three. In fact, I think three of the four opponents Baylor has faced in the conference could be the top three teams in the conference. I really do. It doesn't excuse being essentially 0-4 in conference games and 2-4 overall. But those are certainly three very good teams and another pretty good one in Colorado that you lost to amongst those four. But the offense had not been the story for Iowa State. They were a defensive team. In fact, they had not allowed anyone to score 20 points against them this year. Baylor has the most points against Iowa State this year, and they still lost by 3 touchdowns. That's the problem. This Baylor defense gave up 43 points, and they did not force a single punt on the game. Yep. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the second segment. But where I also don't like this is the fact that so many of us watching the game agree that the turning point was the blocked punt return for a touchdown. It was 14-12 up at that point. It's the second quarter, and a blocked punt turned into a touchdown. Iowa State did not take the lead for good there, and yet most of us, myself included, said, hey, that's the turning point in the game. And Dave Aranda also said, that's the turning point in the game. In fact, here's what the coach said about how his team responded from that.
In those moments, you have to find ways that you can win the game and not have ways that you can lose it. And I think in these last couple losses, there's been those instances where we've almost found a way to lose a game. And to be talking about it and to focus on it and then to still have something like that happen is very disheartening and it's frustrating. And we're better than that. And I take responsibility for it. I have to coach them better.
Past couple weeks, we've found a way to lose games. And I think that is, unfortunately, a pretty accurate depiction of what these last few weeks have been. Colorado absolutely fell apart at the end. BYU let yourself get down 21-0 and 28-7. And this one, you start fast, and then it just absolutely falls apart again. So, like, 3 different ways to lose a game. But you found a way each of those 3 weeks. And what is concerning to me is, again, that happened in the second quarter. And Baylor took the lead again after that at 21-19. But it almost felt like that punt block really woke up everything for Iowa State. And a good national TV shout out for Gavin Yates. Tim Brando saying Gavin Yates scored that touchdown. But of course he was looking at the wrong roster. But that part to me, which is not the big quote that I've got from this press conference, is alarming. You know, we found a way to lose the game, and that's something that we have talked about over these last few weeks. is, it came down to this play, this coaching decision, this bounce of the ball. And things aren't going Baylor's way, but they're also not creating their own luck. In 2021, there was some luck involved there. And Pete talked about it on Friday's show, actually. There were plenty of one-score games. But what Baylor did that season is they won all their home games, and they kind of created their own luck in a lot of those. They are able to have a pick against Iowa State on the 2-point conversion in September. That game, they finally beat a ranked team the first time in 6 years or whatever it was. And it's like, whoa, Baylor was lucky there. Yep, but they also went up to like a 21-7 lead in that game. So you create your luck. Or I'm trying to think of some other ones from that season. Texas Tech misses 50-some-odd yarder at the buzzer in that game that Baylor needed to win in the last game of the regular season in order to have a chance in the playoffs or in the Big 12 championship. It's like, yep, but they also didn't trail in that game. So they hung on, but they weren't in a losing position. Or better yet, how did they get into that Big 12 championship game? They needed an Oklahoma State victory in Bedlam later on that night after the Tech game in order to get there. And they got that win, but they also deserved to be in that Big 12 championship game. They created their own luck because they were already 10-2 by the time that game kicked off. And right now, they're not creating their own luck. And so, yeah, it's things going against you, but there's so many things you can point to of, well, here you didn't create your luck. Blocked punt. You didn't create your luck. I thought the offense made one mistake in the whole game, and it was that pick on 4th down where Sawyer could have ran for the first down. But you made the mistake. You created your luck there. Iowa State scores one before the blocked punt because you go up 14-3 and you give them a short field because you get an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on the touchdown celebration and then you kick it out of bounds. That's not creating your own luck. So that's what I keep seeing about this team because I do see some fans out there that are saying, a couple bounces this way and you're 4-1, but you're not. And you haven't played well enough to create that luck for you the same way you did in years like 2019 and 2021. Right now, they're not making that. But there is a part of this team that is really alarming, and it goes right up to the top. And this is the reason why Baylor lost against Iowa State. We're going to break that down after this word from FanDuel. Yes, you, NFL fan. All right, you have a great chance to start this season with a big return on FanDuel, which is America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you're going to be able to check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Let me say that again. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Once again, FanDuel.com. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, so I kind of alluded to it here on the Locked On Baylor podcast, your team every day, breaking down this loss to Iowa State. I thought the one mistake that the Baylor offense made was that 4th down, 4th and 2. Sawyer could have ran for a first down. He was definitely in a rhythm passing, and he throws it downfield into the end zone, interception. The fact that it's picked off doesn't matter. It's 4th down. Once that ball goes in the air, it's a turnover. And they were saying it during the broadcast. Not a good broadcast team, but they made a good point there. Devin Gardner did of like, run it. Run it. They're rushing 3. Like, go ahead, run it. 2 yards. You're 6'4". Go get it. I thought that was the only mistake for Sawyer Robertson, which means then by, eliminating mistakes on offense, that means this came down to Baylor's defense. And it absolutely 1,000% did. No one this year had made Rocco Becht look like an all Big 12 quarterback until Baylor came into town. Okay, North Dakota didn't do that. Houston didn't do that. Iowa didn't do that. Baylor did that. They made Rocco Becht look great. They didn't get a finger on him all night. No, seriously. They did not have a single sack in the game. Neither team had a sack in the game. So great look for the Baylor offensive line. Well, Iowa State was rushing 3 all night. Baylor's supposed to be a pass rush team. In fact, I gave you on Friday is probably the only key that Baylor could key on and escape Ames with a victory was put Rocco on his butt quite a bit. They didn't do that even once. Not even once. This pass rush that has looked so promising at points this year, you did get Steve Litton back. It didn't matter. Didn't get a finger on Rocco Becht. He also gave up well over 200 passing yards again. In fact, he gave up 277. So you look at the last 3 weeks, Big 12 play, and Baylor's given up 341 through the air, 218 through the air, 277 through the air. That's not good, right? That's really not good. But to make it worse, you look back at it. Colorado, 14 yards per completion. BYU, 12 yards per completion. Iowa State, 17 yards per completion. And Baylor's best passing performance in those 3 games was against Iowa State. They were only 10 yards per completion. We went into this year saying, look, there's a ton of uncertainties with this team coming off a 3-9 year. And a lot of the certainties aren't good certainties, right? But there was one position group where you said, I feel good about this one. Defensive backfield, I feel good about that. Some good young starters in there. They're coming back. We like Dave Aranda calling the defense. Here we go. That's the positional unit we can count on. You're not going to gash us through the passing game and kill us with explosive plays. Wrong. Wrong about that one. I'll hand up. I was way wrong about that one. They're getting gashed in the passing game. And I know there's some injuries right now. Caden Jenkins not being out there. By the way, it took us 2 weeks to hear just anything about Caden Jenkins, whether it was an injury, a suspension. We didn't hear anything. And now we do know that it's some sort of injury. So you need to get him back, obviously, but it really wasn't going all that swimmingly even when he was out there on the field. This Baylor team's getting crushed in the pass game. Crushed. And you got to look at whoever the defensive coordinator is, whoever the defensive play caller is, whoever recruited these guys to come play defense for the Bears and is drawing up the defensive schemes. Thankfully, it's all the same guy. It's all the same guy. Only head coach in America that calls the defense, and it's now not working. As promising as it looked the first couple of weeks, it's not working. Every pass play is an explosive pass play. Every completion the other team has against you is over 10 yards. Through 3 full games, that average has held up. And by the way, in each of those 3 games, you've had a receiver go for over 100 yards against you. Each time. And all 3, you could argue, with their number 1 receivers. This week it was Jaden Higgins, so probably not. It's probably your number 2 option. But Knoll has been banged up. He got very close. He was 2 yards shy of also having 100, by the way, Jalen Knoll. So all 3 of those games, you let a receiver go for over 100 plus against you. That, to me, is like saying, we're not going to take away your number 1 option. Try and beat us. Okay, pretty easy. You have not taken the quarterback's first option away in any of those games. You have not forced them to go through the progressions. You have not forced them to go to inexperienced guys. You haven't done it once in this 3-game losing streak. Jaden Higgins gets 116 on you on Saturday. Lassiter gets 120 against you for BYU. Travis Hunter, the only receiver you really need to key on outside of a Hail Mary attempt, he went for 130 against you. And so you can't take away the top option. Why is anyone going to try to run the ball on you? Who cares? They can pass it every down, and you can't take away anything. And once again, we look at Saturday night's numbers. They didn't force a punt the whole game. I know I've said this phrase so much, it's like a broken record, but how are you going to beat anyone doing that? You didn't force a single punt. You didn't get a sack. You forced one kind of lucky turnover, to be quite frank. Kind of lucky. Rocco should be throwing that ball away and didn't have the arm strength to throw it away. But okay, you get a pass rush in his face, and Garmin Randolph comes away with the pick. That pick just made it not being worked. That pick kept them from 50 points. You were up 14-3 in this one, and Iowa State just casually goes on a 40-7 run and 24-0 to end the game. Talk about just having no answer. And again, an alarming stat from this 3-game losing streak is there's only been twice in that span that Baylor has scored and they have not given up points on the ensuing possession. Twice in 3 weeks. Like that is what do you pin that on? Coach not having a game plan, players not executing, coach not getting his guys in the right mindset for that next possession, or all of the above. Because for the last 2.5 years, we have seen a Baylor football program that has really struggled to answer the bell. Whether it be at the beginning of games at home, or once you get hit in the mouth, or once you get backed up against some adversity in a game that you should have already won, like against Colorado. Or when you have taken advantage of an Iowa State defense that's down a couple of guys, and then Iowa State goes and figures it out, you have no answer. So there's a scenario in all of these games the last 2 years where you just said, man, Baylor didn't answer the bell here. They got their bell rung a little bit. This team came at them with something, and they didn't make an adjustment, and they didn't answer. And I don't know how tough it is to make adjustments, especially offensively, when you can't run the ball, when you've got to have a quarterback who throws it 40 or 50 times a game, every game. I don't know what it is, but time and time again, Baylor has not been able to make adjustments. They were not able to keep Rocco Becht in the pocket, and nor could they get a hand on him, even when they didn't. There was a couple of plays early in the game. Specifically, there was one that was like a 3rd and 15, and Rocco Becht got out of the pocket, and he's running towards the sideline, and there was a Baylor defensive back just watching him get out of bounds, 1 yard past the sticks. First down. Like, go out there and hit somebody. This is I think what we're thinking about when, players say that the players take on the identity of their coach. And Connor Martin said it with us last week, and that's a guy who's been in those locker rooms. That seems like taking on the identity of a coach, just watching a quarterback just waltz out of bounds after getting a first down. It was a bad watch again, and it's 30 points or more in each of the last 3 games you have allowed. And by the way, the only reason why I can't extend those numbers, those great passing numbers against you, to the 4th conference game, if you will, in Utah, is because Utah didn't have their quarterback for half the game. And we all got kind of naive there, myself especially, in saying, yeah, well, Baylor was getting some stops before Cam Rising went out of the game, and that's true. But of course, having Isaac Wilson in there makes a humongous difference, and that's why you don't have, another game of 250 or 300 passing yards against you, another game where each pass play goes for 10 plus yards. So I think he's a great defensive coordinator as a defensive coordinator alone. But right now, Dave Aranda calling the plays, there's nothing that screams defensive guru at you. As much as I would like to think he is, and you look at the rest of his body of work before Baylor, and it's fantastic. But once you're splitting those roles, he's not good at it. They didn't force a punt. They gave up 43 points. They gave up double digits in each of the last 3 quarters. And this is 3 straight weeks of this. So what was supposed to be a strength, this Baylor defense, this Baylor pass rush especially, this Baylor defensive backfield at the beginning of the year, all 3 of them are weaknesses right now, huge weaknesses. And just when you figure something out on offense, right, still not balanced, still not good enough, but you figured something out on offense, you picked the right quarterback, he threw for 250 plus again, he threw for 3 touchdowns again, you still don't get it right on the defensive side of the ball. So if it's not one thing, it's the other for this team. If it's playing a good second half, it means you played a garbage first half, or vice versa. Or if you finally figured out something on offense, well, your defense has fallen off a cliff. And that's what gives me the most angst about all of this and looking towards 6 wins, is that right now they cannot put it all together. And we've been saying that for 2 full seasons, and into this season, that has been the case. And just like my pictures behind me, this defense just cannot hold up. And it's got to change now. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by Gametime. It's the only place I go to buy tickets. I'll tell you what. All right, because you go there, you can toggle the feature for all-in pricing. That means the price you see is the price you're actually going to pay. And I really appreciate that. Most ticketing services are not like that. Plus, you get a panoramic view from your seat before you hit purchase. You can actually see what your view is going to look like. I love that. Plus, it's back with the lowest price guarantee. Your Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So, heed my warning. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON, for $20 off, and download Gametime today. What time is it? No, really, what time? Gametime. I think most of us listening to this episode of Locked On Baylor fans, we believe in a higher power. We believe in signs sent. I think I might have just got one for those of you watching on YouTube. That picture that fell behind me that I have put back up is an homage. It's the Waco Trib cutout from the Sugar Bowl when Baylor won it in 2021. You can't really see it with the glare here. Boy, is that emblematic, because it's almost as if that didn't happen in the Dave Aranda tenure, because it's been so bad since. And it kind of makes you wonder how they got there when you hear this next quote from Aranda. And I know he's talking about this specific team, but it's just not something that is really warm and fuzzy to hear at this point in his tenure and at this point in the season.
All of our boys are trying to win. They're trying to do good. They're trying to achieve. But there's a level of detail and there's a level of professionalism that has to be developed. This league demands it. And until we get it, unfortunately, it's probably going to be stuff like this. And so this is not acceptable. And we have to be able to demand it as coaches and get to that next level.
There's a level of professionalism that we essentially don't have. And Dave said something pretty similar to this last week. And to hear that 2 weeks in a row in year 5 of his coaching tenure at Baylor, that's not good. Because a lot of these guys you had on the team last year, right? And they went through this at 3-9. You know, you're talking about your young defensive backs, Caden Jenkins, Carl Williams, Tevin Williams, to guys on the offensive side with Sawyer Robertson and Campbell Barrington and Monterey Baldwin and all these guys. And then you brought in some guys in the transfer portal. Again, Trigg, Linton, Ashton Hawkins, guys who had been around the block a few times. And yet you still we're talking about they don't have the professionalism to win close games, essentially. After what we saw last year and the year before and halfway through this season, it's like, well, when is that coming? The coach has been here 5 years. And we still don't have that, like the basic professionalism and making plays to not lose the game and then eventually making plays to win the game. Baylor doesn't have any of that. And that's a really alarming thing to hear in year 5. And I want to know like what the hope is. And we'll take a look this week at the schedule. I think there's something to be said from the upcoming schedule. But when you look at this Baylor team, even having played 3 really good Big 12 teams in Utah and BYU and Iowa State, another team that should be ranked in Colorado, like where do you see the silver lining here? Where do you see how this moves forward? Because halfway through the season to hear something like that, that's really alarming. And I had this thought, I think I shared it on the post-game show, #1 Baylor football post-game show, by the way, no big deal. I had this thought during the game of we look at this season and we've been telling you that the effort is better and the personnel is better. Like the team is better than last year. And yet they have a worse record through 6 games this year than they did last year. And I had this thought of all these things we're commending them on this year should have been happening at the end of last season. You know, when you already know you're a bad team, which Baylor knew pretty early on last season, by the last month, when you're not playing for a lot, you should see things like, okay, check, better effort there. Or, all right, finally, it took a couple months, but we're getting execution on this strategy or on this play or on this style. And you just didn't. Like, you didn't get that at any point at the end of last year. There was nothing where you said, wow, Baylor's gotten a lot better at this. And now you're seeing it this year. But that delayed progress, that progress that we should have saw at the end of last year, now carrying over into 2024, that ruins 2 seasons instead of 1. Because in reality, they should have been making that progress at the end of last year. And it's little things, you know, like developing a better pass protection, developing better effort, creating some turnovers, taking away some explosive plays, tackling better. And if those things had happened at the end of last year, then you start 2024 with a fresher deck, okay? You've got guys who know what it takes. They saw it at the end of last year. Maybe it didn't even translate into wins, but you saw better habits at the end of last year. Now you've got a new coaching staff in. You've got some new transfers in. And that's how you build momentum. Instead, you didn't have that momentum at the end of last year, and you're building it up now, and it's probably too late. It's probably too late for a bowl game, and it's probably too late for your coach's job. And I think that ultimately is on the coaching staff. But it's now taken out 2 seasons instead of 1. Instead of just bottoming out at 1 season, you probably bottomed out at 3-9, but it's not looking like it's that much better, if better at all, this year. And that's where this real exhaustion comes in with Baylor football, because it feels like we're saying the same things every week, and we've been saying it for 2.5 years. And it's not just that it has gotten worse since the Sugar Bowl. It's that at no point has it looked like it's gotten any better. Like, there's nothing we can point to yet. And this team really needs the bye week. It really needs the bye week. We'll catch you up on all we can in terms of job status, how the rest of this roadmap looks for this season, and if they can get the 6 wins. Of course, we'll look at Tech more next week. We'll look around the Big 12. But there's a ton of questions that still need to be answered, and we go through week after week, and those questions don't get answered. Baylor loses. They hang tough, but they don't win, and we still have the same questions. So let me know what you think about this team, about this coaching staff, and just what needs to happen. Drop that down in the comments below. And if you're looking at other candidates, who might that be? Drop that in the comments below as well. Be sure to like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell to get notified every time we're dropping a video on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I really appreciate you guys. We got some great numbers once again on the post-game show. That's why you guys have made it the #1 Baylor football postgame show. So I really, really appreciate you guys, especially you everydayers. Can't thank you enough for making this your first listen today and every day. And we'll be back tomorrow with some more of the aftermath and how to move forward on your favorite show, Locked On Baylor.